PowerPoint slides today of the talk. So there's no outline for you to follow, so you have to listen really good. All right? Well, someone has said that movie theaters are modern-day pulpits. People flock to their local multiplexes. They group together, much like we're grouping together this morning, and they find themselves moved by a worldview that is revealed through story form. And they allow themselves to be moved emotionally and led by directors and screenwriters who influence how we feel, how we think, and even how we act. And recognizing that fact at River City Church, we want to be mindful of the movies that we watch. Mindful in the way that we watch them. We want to have our minds engaged, in other words, so that we can pay attention to the themes, whether they're overt or whether they're subtle. And we want to evaluate them and see if they measure up against life experience and against God's Word. And there's another reason why at this church we think it's important to be mindful when we go to the movies, and that's this. Because God's Spirit can show up and can speak in any way He chooses, even through our favorite flicks, even through our favorite movies. And this summer we've witnessed how God's Spirit has spoken powerfully through movies like The Dark Knight, Confessions of a Shopaholic, and most recently the movie 7 Pounds, which we looked at last week. Now I suspect that those of you who've been coming through the summer, when you looked at our list of blockbuster movies that we were going to examine in this series, there were probably one or two titles that maybe you hadn't heard of, unless you're a real movie buff. You're looking at that list of 10 movies or so, and you're like, you know what, I don't know that one, and I haven't heard of that one. But this morning's movie is one that I'm sure all of you have heard of. And that's because it was this year's breakout hit movie. Even before this film was carried by a major movie company, it won the Audience Award at last year's Toronto Film Festival. This film was also the big winner at the Golden Globes. It won Golden Globes for every category that it was nominated. And it won 8 Oscars at this year's Oscars Award, including the most coveted award of all, the year's best movie. The year's best movie. And of course, if you haven't guessed it, I'm talking about the movie Slumdog Millionaire. How many of you have seen the movie? Raise your hands. Okay, so the majority of you have seen this. I first saw Slumdog Millionaire in the theater, maybe even this theater. And for what it's worth, I would say that this is the best cinematographic love story that I have seen in years. And you warriors out there, I'm not talking love story in the conventional sense. I'm not talking love story in the kind of sappy, shallow, infatuation-type love that forms the basis of so many movies that Hollywood puts out today with lines like, "You had me at hello." I'm like, gag, right? Now I'm talking about the messy, sacrificial, lay your life on the line for the woman that you love kind of love story. And I'm not the only one that this movie has impacted. It's impacted audiences worldwide. It cost only $15 million to make. And get this, even though its budget was a tenth, actually an 11th of what the movie The Curious Case of Benjamin Button was, which was the runner-up for this year's best movie, Slumdog Millionaire has generated more than $30 million more in revenue. So The Curious Case has generated $330 million, Slumdog $360 million. On a $15 million investment. It's pretty remarkable. And there are several themes in this movie that we could look at together. But this morning, I just want to look at one theme with you, and it's the theme that gets presented in the very first scene of the movie. Check it out. This clip begins with Jamal, the main character of the movie, and he's being interrogated by a police officer. And Jamal is what people in India refer to as a slum dog. And a slum dog is someone who grew up in the slums. These are the poorest of the poorest of the world's poor, not just India's poor. And yet somehow, to everyone's bewilderment, this particular slumdog, Jamal, has made it as a contestant on India's version of the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And not only is it amazing that a slumdog would actually make it as a contestant on this nationally loved television show, but what's even more amazing is that no one, slumdog or otherwise, has ever made it as far in the show as Jamal has. No educated person, no doctor or lawyer has ever made it past the 60,000 rupee mark. But Jamal has already won 10 million rupees, and he's one question away, as you saw in the clip, from winning 20 million rupees. And it's unbelievable. It's completely bewildering. I mean, a person would they'd have to be a genius to make it that far. But there's one thing that everyone knows, including Jamal, is that he's no genius. He really doesn't even have an education. And that's why the authorities suspect fraud. They think that he's cheating. Jamal must be cheating. He must have someone in the crowd who's tipping him off and giving him signals. Or another idea that the police have is that he's got a wireless mic, and someone has given him signals that way. And they even search his body for a microchip to see if he's got something embedded under his skin that's giving him the answers to the questions. And so before Jamal answers this final question, he gets whisked away by the authorities, and the police detain him, and they beat him, and they torture him, and they try to get him to confess to cheating. In fact, they nearly kill him. But Jamal maintains his innocence, and in order to do that, what he does is he recounts his experiences from childhood to show that all of these experiences braided together to give him the answers to the very questions that were being asked of him on this nationally loved game show. And as more and more of the pieces come together from Jamal's childhood, and as the police interrogating him hear his story, they begin to see that no one could make this up. It's so believable it has to be believable. And so they start coming to the conclusion that Jamal must be telling the truth. And then they switch their view, which if you watch the movie, it's really interesting, because first they think he's a cheat, he's a fraud, and then they think, well, he's just lucky. It's just coincidence. It's like, the slot machine. At some point, someone's going to pull the handle and they're going to get the big break. And in this particular instance, Jamal has just received the exact questions that needed to fit in line with his life experiences for him to make it this far. But, interesting, Jamal will have none of that either. He'll have none of this idea that it's luck. It's true, Jamal has seen and experienced things that no human being, let alone a child, should ever experience and see. His mother is murdered right in front of his eyes in a religious war. His peers are abused and sold into slavery, and in some instances, it's sex slavery. He's forced to lie and to cheat just to get a meal. Jamal lives in a bitter, cruel world, and still, throughout his life, Jamal has seen too many uncanny coincidences to believe in coincidence. He's seen too many things line up in his life to believe in luck, and so he'll have none of that. He rejects the idea that he's where he is because of luck. He says it's because it's his destiny. It's his destiny. And in this next clip that we're going to watch, we see Jamal as a young boy. He's reflecting on his childhood, and we get this clip of his childhood, and he's here speaking to his child friend, Latika, whom he has just saved from the sex trade. Check it out.